The German Shepherd never saw the truck coming. One moment she was sprinting across the highway, heart pounding, milk still dripping from her swollen body. The next, everything ended in a burst of noise, heat, and crushing metal. Cars rushed past. No one stopped. No one noticed the lifeless body lying just beyond the road. And deep inside the forest, beneath the twisted roots of an ancient oak, two tiny lives cried out for a mother who would never return. I share new stories here every day, and I would really appreciate it if you hit subscribe and liked my video. Now, let's jump back into my story. I'm sure you'll love it if you keep listening till the end. That morning had begun like all the others. The forest breathed slowly, wrapped in warm summer light. Birds hopped from branch to branch, and the wind carried the scent of pine, earth, and distant water. Beneath the oak tree, hidden where no predator had yet found them, the German Shepherd had built a fragile shelter using dry leaves, grass, and instinct older than fear itself. Inside, her two newborn puppies slept, blind and helpless, their tiny bodies rising and falling against her chest. Write in the comments and tell me which part of the world you're watching this story from. I'm really interested to see how far this story has traveled. They were barely 2 weeks old. They knew nothing of highways, trucks, or danger. All they knew was her warmth, her heartbeat, the steady comfort of her tongue cleaning them, the soft sound of her breathing when she curled around them at night. But food had grown scarce. The forest had not been kind lately, and her body was struggling to produce enough milk. She had crossed the highway before, many times, always fast, always alert, always back before the sun climbed too high. This time was different. By midday, sunlight filtered through the oak leaves and spilled into the den, warming the ground. The puppies stirred, wriggling closer together. Their cries began softly at first, uncertain sounds, but grew louder as the hours passed. No familiar scent returned. No gentle nudge. No comforting lick. Hunger settled in. Cold followed. Their cries weakened, turning hoarse and broken, as if even hope was running out of breath. They pressed their tiny bodies together, instinctively clinging to the only warmth left their bond with each other. The forest, vast and indifferent, remained quiet. Predators passed nearby, unaware of what lay hidden beneath the oak roots. Insects crawled across fallen leaves. Time moved forward without mercy. And still, the puppies waited. That was when the sound drifted through the trees. A faint whimper, barely audible, almost swallowed by the wind. The lioness froze mid-step. She had not been hunting. Her belly was full, and her mind was focused on her own cubs, waiting just over the ridge. They were only a week old, small, fragile, utterly dependent on her. Every instinct told her to ignore the sound, to keep moving, to protect her blood. But the sound came again, weak, desperate, something deep within her chest tightened. She turned. Each step toward the oak tree went against everything the wild had taught her. The scent was wrong. The sound was wrong. This was not prey. This was not kin. This was something else entirely. She pushed through thick brush, claws sinking into damp soil until she reached the base of the oak. There, beneath its roots, lay two trembling puppies, their bodies thin, their cries fading. They did not move when she approached. They did not try to flee. They simply cried. The lioness lowered her head and sniffed them. Her breath stirred the leaves. Her shadow covered their fragile forms. One careless movement could have ended everything. Instead, she lay down slowly, carefully. The forest seemed to hold its breath. She curled her massive body around the puppies, shielding them from the wind, from the cold, from death itself. And when they instinctively searched for warmth, she did not pull away. She let them nurse, High above, the trees whispered as if unsure of what they were witnessing. Somewhere nearby, her own cubs waited, unaware that their mother had just crossed a line no creature was ever meant to cross. And in that quiet moment, beneath the oak tree, the rules of the wild began to break. The lioness stayed longer than she should have. Long enough for the sun to shift, long enough for the forest to change its voice. Birds went silent. Insects slowed. Somewhere far off, another predator called, low and territorial. The wild does not like hesitation. It punishes it. And yet, the lioness remained curled around the two puppies as if they were her own flesh and blood. When the puppies finished nursing, they did not cry. They slept. That alone should have sent her away. She rose slowly, every muscle tense, listening for danger. Before leaving, she did something no instinct could explain. She licked them clean, the same way she cleaned her cubs. The same careful strokes, the same patience. Then she turned and disappeared into the trees, carrying the forest's confusion with her. The puppies slept through the afternoon, but hunger always returns faster than mercy. By evening, their cries began again, soft at first, then urgent. The oak tree offered no answers. Shadows stretched longer. The temperature dropped. Owls watched from above, eyes glowing like cold moons. A fox passed close enough to smell them, pausing, head tilted, but the den was hidden well. Luck for now still lingered. When darkness fully settled, the lioness returned. Not once, not twice. Every morning, every evening, she came quietly, always alert, always ready to defend or flee. She fed them, cleaned them, and left before dawn. She never lingered long enough for the forest to fully understand what she was doing. But the forest always understands. Eventually, her cubs began to notice her absences. They whimpered when she left. They crawled closer to one another, confused by the smell of strange milk on her fur when she returned. She nuzzled them, reassured them, but something had shifted. Her energy was divided now. Her time split between two impossible responsibilities. Days passed. The puppies grew stronger. Their cries became louder. Their bodies filled out just enough to survive another night. And with each visit, the lioness hesitated a little longer before leaving them behind. Danger followed that hesitation. One morning, as she approached the oak, she smelled something wrong, human. Fresh boot prints pressed into soft earth. A snapped branch. The faint scent of metal and oil carried on the breeze. She froze, heart pounding, eyes scanning the trees. Humans meant traps. Guns, death. She circled wide, watching from the brush for a long time before daring to move closer. The puppies were still there, alive. She exhaled slowly. But she understood then what the forest was trying to say. This place was no longer safe. That night, she made a decision that would change every life involved, under a pale moon. She returned to the oak tree and carefully lifted one puppy by the scruff of its neck. The puppy did not struggle. It trusted the grip, the way all young animals do when lifted by a mother. She carried it through the forest, step by silent step. Back to her own den. Her cubs stiffened when they saw the stranger. They hissed. One growled, low and uncertain. The lioness responded instantly, a firm sound, sharp and final. The cubs froze. She placed the puppy down and stood over it, unblinking. This was not a suggestion. This was a command. Then she went back for the second puppy. By the time the sun rose, 4 small bodies lay tangled together inside the den. 2 lion cubs, 2 German Shepherd puppies. Different heartbeats, different futures. One mother. The days that followed were not gentle. The puppies learned quickly they did not survive. They learned when to move, when to stay still, when silence meant safety. The cubs learned restraint, patience, and something like curiosity. Sometimes they played too rough. Sometimes teeth grazed skin. Every time, the lioness intervened. She taught without cruelty. She protected without hesitation. Other predators came close, drawn by the unusual scent. Hyenas laughed in the distance. A leopard watched from a tree once, calculating. Each time, the lioness stood between danger and the den, her body a wall of muscle and will. The forest watched, whispered, judged, because nothing like this should exist. And yet, it did. The forest did not accept them, but it adapted by the time the puppies opened their eyes. The den no longer felt like a mistake. It felt real. Their world was fur, warmth, and movement. They learned the shape of safety by crawling into the lioness's side, learned comfort in the steady rumble of her breath. They did not know she was different. To them, she was simply mother. The lion cubs grew fast. So did the puppies, but they grew in different ways. The cubs learned power early, how to pounce, how to wrestle, how to bite and release. The puppies learned awareness. They learned when to duck their heads, when to roll onto their backs, when to read a warning in the twitch of a tail. Playtime was education. Every tumble in the grass carried a lesson. Every mistake carried risk. The lioness watched constantly. When a cub's claws dug too deep, she intervened. When a puppy yelped too loudly, she calmed it with a low, reassuring sound. She never favored one over the other. Food came in equal turns. Warmth was shared. Discipline was the same. The forest noticed the difference. Predators that once ruled certain paths began avoiding them. Scents shifted. Patterns broke. The lioness hunted with a sharper edge now, not just for strength, but for precision. She could not afford injury, for lives depended on her. One evening, a storm tore through the forest. Rain slammed into the earth. Wind bent branches until they cracked. The den flooded partially, forcing them out into the open. Lightning split the sky, illuminating for terrified young shapes clinging to the lioness as she led them uphill, teeth bared against the chaos. That night, something changed when thunder roared close enough to shake the ground. The puppies panicked, scrambling blindly. One slipped toward the slope, small paws failing in the mud. Before the lioness could move, one of her cubs lunged clumsy. Desperate hand blocked the fall with its body. The puppy survived. The cub limped for days. From that moment on, the cubs stopped seeing the puppies as strange intruders. They became pack, not by instinct, but by experience. Seasons turned. Summer burned into autumn. Autumn cooled into winter. The puppies' bodies lengthened. Their ears stood tall. Their senses sharpened. They learned to run without sound, to follow scent trails, to freeze when danger breathed too close. They watched the lioness. Hunt, they learned distance, timing, patience. They were not lions. But they were not helpless dogs either. When prey fell, they waited. When danger came, they circled low, barking sharp warnings that cut through the forest like alarms. Their voices became part of the territory's language. Not everyone survived this time of change. One night, a rival lioness crossed into their land. Hunger drove her. Desperation made her reckless. She found the den while the lioness was away hunting. The cubs scattered. The puppies stood their ground. They should have run, but they didn't. Their barking was wild, frantic, fearless. It did not scare the intruder, but it slowed her. Long enough, the lioness returned in a blur of muscle and fury. The fight was brutal. Teeth clashed. Blood stained the dirt. The rival fled, but not before leaving deep wounds across the lioness's flank. She survived, barely, 4 days. She could not hunt. The puppies stayed close, alert, refusing to sleep deeply. They barked at every shadow. They guarded her the only way they knew how. That was when the forest truly changed its mind, because it saw something new. Not dominance, not instinct, loyalty. The lioness healed slowly. Scars traced her body like memories carved into flesh. She grew quieter after that, slower, more cautious. And she began to prepare them for something she could not explain. Distance, she led them farther from the den. Tested them. Let them make mistakes. Let them recover. She watched from afar as the puppies tracked. Guarded, protected, because she knew what the forest would eventually demand. Nothing born of love escapes. Time. The day the lioness stopped following them was the day the puppies understood it happened without ceremony. No warning, no sound. They moved through the tall grass together, the same way they always had for young bodies, alert and synchronized. The cubs bounded ahead, practicing their power. The puppies stayed wide, scanning, listening, guarding the edges. Then they realized she wasn't there. They stopped, turned. The lioness stood several lengths back, thin by brush. Her golden eyes watched them with an intensity that felt heavier than danger. She did not move forward when they waited. She did not call them back. She simply stood. The cubs returned to her side instinctively, brushing against her legs, confused but obedient. The puppies hesitated. Every step toward her felt right. Every step away felt wrong. She took one step back. That was the answer. The forest had been patient, but it would not bend forever. The puppies were no longer small. Their scent was changing. Their presence was becoming a risk, not just to her, but to the cubs. Other lions had begun to circle farther out. Human sounds echoed more often. The line between miracle and disaster had grown thin. The lioness lowered her head and released a single low sound, not threatening, not angry. Final, the puppies froze. They did not bark, they did not whimper. They stood still as the world split open beneath their paws. She turned away. The cubs followed, just like that. The family broke in half. The puppies stayed where they were long after the forest swallowed the lioness and her cubs. They lay side by side that night, backs pressed together, eyes open, listening to sounds they had never had to face alone before. Hunger came fast, fear came faster. They adapted, because that was the final lesson she had taught them. They hunted small prey together, took turns sleeping, one always awake, always watching. They avoided lions, avoided humans, avoided everything that smelled like loss. Months passed, their bodies filled out. Muscles hardened. Their movements became smooth, efficient. They no longer barked unless necessary. When they did, it was purposeful warning, not panic. They crossed rivers, learned new territories, learned the cost of mistakes, sometimes in the quiet moments before dawn. They lifted their heads toward distant sounds, low roars carried on the wind. They never answered. They never chased the echo. They survived. Years passed, the forest aged them the way it ages all. Survivors by taking softness and leaving strength. Their fur thickened. Their scars told stories no one else could read. They moved like shadows, together always, a bond no separation could break. Then, one season, something changed. The roars grew closer, familiar, not threatening. Weak, they followed the sound for 2 days, moving carefully, instincts screaming with every step. When they reached the old territory, it barely looked the same. Trees had fallen. Paths had shifted. But the den was still there, and so was she. The lioness lay near the entrance. Thinner now, slower, her breathing shallow. Time had taken its payment. Her cubs were gone grown, scattered, or lost to the wild. The queen of that land rested alone. Until she wasn't. She lifted her head when the scent reached her, paused, her eyes widened not in fear, but recognition. Two large shapes emerged from the trees. No growling, no challenge. They approached slowly, respectfully, heads lowered. When they reached her, they did not touch her right away. They lay beside her instead, just close enough for warmth, just close enough to say, "We are here." That night, they hunted not for themselves, for her. They brought food back to the den, placing it near her mouth the way she once had for them. They guarded her sleep, cleaned her wounds with gentle licks, stayed when the forest grew loud and dangerous. They did not leave again because she had given them life. When the world had taken everything away, and now, when time had finally come to collect its debt, they paid it back with loyalty the wild would never forget. The forest noticed when the lioness stopped roaring. It wasn't sudden. It wasn't dramatic. It was the kind of silence that creeps in slowly, like dusk replacing daylight. The birds still sang. The wind still moved the grass. But something powerful had grown quiet at the heart of the land. The two German shepherds felt it before they understood it. Her breathing had changed. Each rise of her chest took more effort than the last. Her eyes stayed closed longer now, and when she opened them, they searched the world with a softness that hadn't been there before. Age had thinned her body, dulled her once golden coat, but it had not taken her presence. Even lying still, she was unmistakably mother. They stayed close, always close. One rested near her head, the other near her flank. They took turns standing watch, ears sharp, bodies ready. No predator dared approach, not because they were feared, but because the land itself seemed to warn them away. Something sacred was happening here. Something even hunger knew better than to interrupt. They hunted carefully, smaller prey now, easier kills. They brought food back and waited patiently while she ate. When she could no longer chew well, they tore the meat gently, laying it at her mouth the way she once had when they were clumsy and small. At night, the cold came faster. They pressed against her, sharing warmth, sharing breath. When she stirred, they lifted their heads. When she slept, they did not. Memories lived in the quiet moments. The smell of rain on stone reminded them of the den. A rustle in the grass echoed the sound of lion cubs wrestling. Sometimes, when the wind shifted just right, one of them would wag its tail without realizing, an old reflex tied to a time when safety was guaranteed. The lioness opened her eyes one last time at dawn. The sky was pale, washed in soft pink and gold. She looked at them both, slowly, deliberately. There was no fear in her gaze, only recognition, only peace. She made a low sound, not a roar, not a warning, a farewell. Her breathing slowed, then stopped. The forest did not erupt. It bowed. The birds fell silent. Even the wind seemed to pause, as if waiting to see what the two dogs would do next. They did not howl. They did not cry. They lay beside her for a long time, touching her with their noses, waiting for something they already knew would not return. When the sun climbed higher, they stood together began the work of honoring her. They guarded her body. For days, they chased away scavengers, stood firm against hyenas, growled at lions who came too close, and froze when they realized this territory was no longer ruled by teeth but by devotion. When the forest finally took her back, the dogs left quietly. They did not look behind them. They carried her lessons forward instead. Years later, travelers spoke of strange guardians seen at the forest's edge, two powerful dogs who walked together, who never fought each other, who protected lost animals and vanished before humans could get close. Some said they chased off poachers. Others claimed they guided injured creatures to water. No one ever managed to follow them. But the forest remembered it, remembered the lioness, who broke every rule, and the two lives she saved, who repaid her not with instinct, but with love. Long after the lioness was gone, her presence remained. It lingered in the paths animals avoided without knowing why. It echoed in the stillness before dawn, when the forest seemed to listen instead of speak. And it lived most clearly in the two German shepherds who moved like living shadows through the land she once ruled. They were no longer simply survivors. They were guardians. Wherever they went, imbalance followed on, then disappeared. Injured animals were found near water sources, alive when they should have been dead. Smaller creatures crossed dangerous clearings unharmed, as if watched by something unseen. Even predators altered their routes, turning away from places that felt wrong to challenge. The dogs never stayed long. They appeared when needed. Left when the work was done, people tried to explain them. Some said they were abandoned military dogs gone feral. Others believed they were spirits, protectors shaped by the forest itself. A few locals told the story in whispers of a lioness who raised dogs, and dogs who learned the meaning of loyalty beyond species. Most laughed. The forest didn't. Years passed. One winter, harsh and unforgiving, a wildfire tore through the eastern edge of the land. Flames swallowed trees, smoke darkened the sky, and animals fled in blind panic. Rangers later reported something they couldn't explain to large dogs running toward the fire, not away from it. They herded deer toward the river, barked warnings near trapped dens, refused to leave until the last cries faded. When the fire died, no trace of them remained, only survival where there should have been loss. Time, relentless as ever, finally began to claim its due. The dogs aged. Their movements slowed. Their muzzles grayed, but they never separated. When one limped, the other adjusted pace. When one slept, the other watched. On their final journey, they returned to the old territory, not because instinct demanded it, but because memory did. The den was barely visible now. Earth had collapsed. Plants had reclaimed the space. But the air felt heavy with familiarity. They lay down near where the entrance once was, side by side, just as they had the night they were first left alone. The forest was quiet, peaceful. As the sun dipped below the horizon, one dog rested its head against the other's neck. A slow breath, then another, and finally, stillness. By morning, they were gone. No struggle, no fear, only rest. Animals passed by and did not disturb the place. Birds nested nearby. Grass grew tall and unbroken. It was as if the land itself had decided this ground was not to be touched. Because some stories do not end. They become part of the world. And somewhere deep in that forest, in the space between instinct and choice, a truth settled into the roots of the earth love is not bound by species, strength, or survival. It is bound by action. The lioness had chosen love when the wild demanded indifference. The dogs had chosen loyalty when time demanded separation. And the forest, once skeptical, had chosen to remember. If this story stayed with you, if it made you pause or breathe a little deeper, then don't let it end here. I share stories like this every day, stories that remind us what love looks like when no one is watching. Hit subscribe, leave a comment, and tell me what this story made you feel. Asterisk, because sometimes the most powerful stories aren't about what we are, but about what we choose to protect.